Good evening, all. Welcome to episode 64 of Axanar Confidential. And tonight, a very special guest. I say that because he's one of my favorite people in the world, Ted Brunetti. Ted is joining us from New York. How are you, Ted? Hold up in your apartment in New York. Oh, hold on. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's my fault. There we go. Wait. Hold on, Ted. There we go. I'm sorry.
Okay. Greetings.
How are you, man?
I'm hanging in there. I've been by myself since I think March 7th in my little apartment in New York City. I have an apartment in LA, but I have more closet space in LA than I have apartment space in New York. But I've been stuck here since March 7th. But you know, through all this insanity on many fronts. But I'm hanging in there.
Now you say you've been stuck there. Are you going out and shopping at least with a mask and gloves and sanitizer?
Once a week, once every 10 days. I do run. When there's a nice day, I run up to Central Park, I run the reservoir, and I run back down. So that's
great. Okay, good. So you're getting out. You're getting a little vitamin D production there.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's good. So for all of you, and just so you know, we've got a bunch of our regulars here. I want to say hi to Jim Westbrook, of course. Miss Karen B, J. Mendez, how are you? PJ White, another one of our regulars. Jay Freer, he must be one of yours because he's like, where's Ted?
From Atlanta.
And my good friend Dale Simpson, who's my number one in our Star Trek fan club. So thank you all for coming. And I'm sure a lot of people were going, who's Ted Brunetti? And why is he on Axanar Confidential? So he's on Axanar Confidential because Ted was one of my acting coaches in LA. And I know I'm going to embarrass you, Ted, but you're like one of the most amazing people I know because you have just unbelievable energy. Like when I'm in your presence, usually that's what everyone says about me. And then I get in your presence and I'm like,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, Ted, let's start off. Ted, tell us how you got started in acting and where you're from Pittsburgh, right?
I grew up in Pittsburgh. I had one of 10 kids. We had one bathroom and 2 pianos growing up in the house. And I'm seven of 9. How about that? I have one little sister, didn't live very long, so I grew up with 9 kids. So I was 7 of 9. And I know that you all get that because I actually use it sometimes as a name. And some people go, "What is that?" And I'm like, "That's how I know who's a Trekkie fan or not when they know 7 of 9." But because I'm 7 of 9, and I have two brothers and 6 sisters alive, and all grew up watching Star Trek. I must say, was always a big fan, and who knew that later in my life too. I'm not name dropping here, but you know, I loved it when Whoopi joined the cast, who's a friend, and so that's.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So
at any rate, so I grew up in Pittsburgh. A lot of music and art in the family. My parents met when they were 14 doing plays and did it till the day they died. Well, my mom passed 2 years ago, but at any rate, I grew up with that. In 2nd grade, I knew this is what I wanted to do, and I was very influenced by my older brother David, my oldest sister. My oldest sister's a drummer, Teddy Brunetti, and Teddy with an I, T-E-D-I, and we all are musical and artistic. And I went to Carnegie Mellon Summer School. Then that's when I knew I wanted to do that. My brother had gone there. And I had training, moved to New York. I crossed paths with a dear lifelong friend and mentor, Uta Hagen. Any of you who know anything about acting know who she is. And just began my career there. And how
do you fall in with Uta Hagen? Because that's like serious to all of our fans out there who are watching. Uta Hagen is a legend in New York acting and written a couple books, one of which was, at least one was required reading when I started off with Howard Fine in LA. And hear her.
Consider her book like the Bible on acting. It's called Respect for Acting. She was sort of the Meryl Streep of theater during her life. She's Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. She was in the original Streetcar Named Desire with Brando, etc., and did the tour, did the London Company and Broadway. But she mentored everybody, like the most famous actors of her generation. And I had the thrill, actually, one of my first gigs when I was out in LA, I was hired to work with George C. Scott and Jack Lemmon. They were doing a remake of Inherit the Wind. And the director, another one of my mentors, Dan Petrie Sr., asked me if I would come and work with them and help them learn the script and I worked with them for 2-3 weeks before the rest of the cast joined them. And but they took me under their wing because they knew Uta way back in the day from Broadway where they started, and they just shared all kinds of great stories about them on Broadway with her. And so they embraced me, and that was my first gig in LA, was working with George C. Scott and Jack Lemmon for those. It was
the last play I saw on Broadway 20 years ago, at least 20 years ago, because it's been forever since I've seen it, was Inherit the Wind with George C. Scott and Charles Durning.
Wow. Well, they did the remake after that, and they both had played it on Broadway, both Jack and George, but they switched roles for the TV thing, and Jack won an Emmy for it. It was a magnificent experience, and then I always coached and helped friends. Just, I'd say, buy me a sandwich, and I'd help them with auditions or a role or something they were working on. And then Uta for years tried to get me to teach, and I kept saying no, no, no. And then she said, "You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be good at it." And they finally gave me a studio down there, and it took off. And then I moved to I went to LA to work on a pilot, and one thing led to another, and I ended up teaching. At the AFI, I taught directors, producers, and writers. I subbed in there for a lot of their teachers, and they invited me down to USC Graduate Film School, where I was adjunct faculty in the film department, where I taught directors, producers, and writers, which was magnificent. Did it for years. Learned probably more than I taught. It was magnificent. And I coach a lot of actors, very famous ones and up-and-coming ones, television, film, new media, theater, which I continue to do. And I also, I think when I met you in that same time, I created my own project, a half-hour comedy, which is, I'm actually currently in negotiations with a big studio. I'll keep it for now, but that's actually ongoing, even during the pandemic. So, that. And so life.
Well, by the way, I coached at USC also.
You what?
I coached at USC.
Get out of here. What?
Men's volleyball, 88 to 92.
Get out. Wow. Very cool. No, I never did that.
I graduated law school. I passed the bar exam, and I moved out to LA and took the job as the assistant men's volleyball coach at USC.
How long had you been into volleyball?
Well, at that point, I started coaching in 81.
But how did you end up in volleyball? Like, where did that come from?
In college, it was like the one sport I was really good at in college. And I started coaching my senior year in college just as a volunteer assistant for a local high school. And then got a job coaching at high school. And then met some amazing national team coaches from the U.S. and Japan. And they took me under their wing. And once a year, I went from like here as a coach to here as a coach.
Wow. And
it changed my life. And it was amazing. Anyway, we're talking about you. So, okay. So just tell some of the, and by the way, everyone, you got to know, I started acting in LA in acting school with Howard Fine, and Ted was teaching at the Howard Fine studio. And Howard Fine everyone in Hollywood, I guess, knows Howard, right? He's a pretty big name. And as I've always told people here, he's coached Chris Pine, who we all know as Captain Kirk from Star Trek movies and all. But here's the thing. Howard Fine and Ted Brunetti are two opposite ends of the teaching spectrum as far as personality goes. Because this is Howard. Let me do my impressions. This is Howard. Yes, that's very good, Alec. But okay, that's Howard. Very intellectual, very calm. Here's Ted. Okay, so what we want to do here, and let's do, right? That's you. And that's what's so engaging about you. You are mesmerizing as a coach. Like you can't take, as a student, I can't take my eyes off you because you are just all about learning. And you're so committed. It's like, which of course you have to be in acting. And it's amazing. And I love that about you, Ted.
Well, first of all, I thank you. It's because I love what I do. And I'm also an actor. So I know what it's like. Unlike Howard, I actually do it. And so, it's a different perspective. And so I'm on the front line. So I know exactly. There's almost nothing anybody in the classroom is been up against or is experiencing that I haven't experienced myself or been around people that have. So I have hopefully firsthand connection to what is going on in the room. So I think that like my mentor, Uta, everything that came out of her mouth was never something she meditated on or read about. It's what she learned on the front line, solving her own challenges as an actress. And that's what she then offered, or the tools with which to solve problems and how to create the highest level of work possible, which is what she demanded in everything she did. So,
and tell everyone out there who doesn't know. So tell us, I mean, I know it's name dropping. Tell us some of the people that you've worked with as
me? Oh boy. Well, as a coach, as an actor, I'll say as an actor. Well, Whoopi was the first comedy I did. I did a scene with Whoopi Goldberg, and I did my first movie. It was a Pacino movie, so that's not bad. I've coached, like Jack. I've worked with Jack Lemmon and George C. Scott.
Pretty good. So how is that being I mean, you coached, when you coached him, you were a young guy. Whoop, I lose?
Yeah, well, I was in my 30s.
And how old were they?
Boy, 70.
Yeah.
But what was cool was we connected, and I'll share a quick story. We were in the parking lot. We were up in Calabasas where where they were rehearsing. And the first time I was new to LA, I was driving around seeing real cactuses. I'm like, what the heck? It looked like I was on a set to me because I had never seen that kind of terrain. I grew up in the Northeast here. And but to be in the room with them, we were leaving and going back to our cars, and Dan turned to me and he said, Ted, he said, this is an odd thing to say. I don't talk about this much. He said, you were amazing. I said, what do you mean? He said, I knew you would hang with them. He said, but you really hung with them. Well, I'm also used to Uta Hagen, who did not suffer fools and functioned she set the bar for level of work, for real. And so I was used to that. So and he knew that. That's why he invited me to work with them, that intimate setting for 3 weeks. I mean, I look back on it. I don't talk about it that much, but it's something, it's every principle they ever had being put into action in front of my face by these two mountains of talent, who the likes of which will never come around again. They started in the theater, and then when TV was created, and then films, and that's where they got actors from, was the theater, and they were the top of the line of their generation. So to be around that and that focus and that energy, and to see every principle you believe in being executed, was drugs don't give you that kind of a high. I remember driving back in my car going, this is why I don't do drugs. This drugs. Yeah. For real. It was awesome. But I will share this before I forget to say this, but I don't think I would. One of the things that I appreciated about you was when I first met you, you had shared your passion with I knew you were working on the Star Trek things because we had worked on some of the things at the time, but a couple of things. You had an innate knowledge of what this was and a connection and a passion about it, but no teacher can give you that. So you came with that. My job, no one gives anybody talent or passion. You had that. So my job was to help you focus and ground that. And I've, in watching the things that I've seen on the current incarnation of what you're doing, because I remember from the first stage and then seeing that now, how much just being simple and grounded. And a lot of the work is actually behind your eyes, and there's no effort to it. So when you can't see the effort is when you know you're doing. Yeah. But I remember that about you, and I remember your passion. I remember that it made it fun for me because of you talk about my passion, your level of passion for the project and what it is and it's all the aspects of it you brought. And so that's a gift to a teacher, to then get to help you realize what you wanted to do with it and to try to help you focus that passion and energy that you had and care. So that's been, a tip of the hat to you for that, for real.
Well, thanks. And by the way, we're joined by Marilyn Macintyre, who is another colleague of Ted's, and another one of my acting coaches, who I love immensely. Marilyn, oh God, you're just amazing. I love you so much. Marilyn, I think Marilyn was the last class I took in LA. I think you were already off on Broadway maybe when I took the class with Marilyn. I'm not sure. But anyway, Marilyn.
Were you ever in our class when we team taught?
Yes, that's where I started. What I got out of the first, the introduction acting, whatever its first class is, he assigns you to other, and I got assigned to you and Marilyn. Yeah, and it was awesome. It was wonderful. I just and I was still like, because Howard's class was much more, it was almost like Psych 101. Like, you know, there were 30 kids and you're sitting in the seat. And then your class is like, all of a sudden you're in with like 12 students and 2 teachers. And in this little, we were in the little room at that point at the old, right, Sunset. And it was like acting on steroids. And I was like, oh, you
well,
know.
my metaphor is this.
I'm sorry?
My metaphor, in a way, now, Marilyn would probably agree. When you took that first course at Howard's, that's sort of the tour of the gym. He gave you the tour of all the different machines at the gym and exercises. When you came into our room, we said, all right, roll up your sleeves. We're going to start working out now. This is the first machine. And then it's the real focused, digging in, really doing the work. And so it's a slightly different gear.
Well, you know, it's also that, you know, because we talk about it in coaching volleyball, we talk about it as well. And that is, you know, you go through the 4 stages of learning: unconscious incompetence, you don't know what you don't know; conscious incompetence, you know what you don't know; conscious competence, you know it, but you got to think about it; and then unconscious competence. Howard was me getting through unconscious incompetence. conscious incompetence, right? I left Howard's class. I was like, all right, I know I got to do. I don't know how to do it, but I know I know where the challenge is. And then I got into your class, and you got me through, you know, conscious or the part of the conscious incompetence. Like, okay, I'm working through. There are these skills, and I've got to start learning these skills to get where I need to go. And I'll say we just had a shoot 2 months ago where we did all my stuff for the new episodes. It was just me. It was one day just me. So it was about 2 hours on stage and plenty of time to prepare and all. And the director was he was absolutely thrilled. He was like, that was so easy. It was like one thing we're on. And I was like, well, listen, I've been living with this character for 6 years. I've had Howard Fine, David Corey, Marilyn Macintyre, Ted Brunetti. If I haven't learned something at this point, just shoot me and I'll recast the role.
No, but you also just said something about your preparation. And one of the things that I believe that a great teacher can teach you is, like an athlete, how to prepare. Your relationship to practice determines your level of quality as an actor or as an athlete. And it is the quality of the practice that determines the quality of the performance.
Absolutely. Marty Heyman asked a question: what's better, method acting or character acting?
What my immediate answer is whatever works. I don't know exactly what character acting means, and there's a lot of people that have a definition of method acting that it's not necessarily a clean definition of what that is. It's but I guess the first thing I ever say whenever I teach, give a seminar, lecture, whatever, is there's no one way to do this. You have to find what works for you. There are certain actors who say they would never be where they are if they didn't have a wonderful or great acting teacher or acting classes or acting school. Then you have other brilliant people who have never been in an acting. Their acting class was the doing of it. They had something going for them that got them cast in something, but they were smart enough to be sponges around the people who had skills around them, and they learned through that. That was their school. So there is no one way. There's no, actor studio, which I'm a guest member of. So I know I'm in the Meisner, so I'm very familiar in all of that. And when I teach, it's pretty much the combo platter. Udo, to me, though, was the most articulate of them all. And her laser focus on things was profound because she did it. So, people would say, there was an old phrase, those who can't do, teach. And she'd say, no, those who can't do shouldn't teach, was her response to that. But she was living proof of that. But in terms of the one method over another, whatever works for you and whatever gets you to that place, to me, which is just human being in a situation, being believable in imaginary circumstances. Whatever gets you there, you do it. And you don't need to talk about it. You don't need to describe it to someone else. That's your own personal thing. I happen to be, I do it myself as an actor. I also direct, I also produce, and I coach. So I see it from a lot of different angles and from different points of view of a producer, a director, a writer. an actor. And so I think I have a very good, and I've been informed, I'll put it that way, at least, perspectives that go into it. But first thing I always say, just to get back to that, is there's no one way to do this. You have to find what works for you. And I hope that answered your question.
And I think, so 2 parts. Yeah, I think that's.
And there's a way, and there's certain times you can work, certain people work from the inside out, other people work from the outside in. And some people can bounce and forth between the two, and it's not a cookie cutter formulaic thing. Depending on the project, depending on the character, your way into it might vary, depending on the material, depending on your experiences, what the writing is, where you happen to be in that time in your life, what you may have gone through, what you may be going through, what you may be afraid of going through. I find usually it's the combo platter of things you've experienced and your imagination, and those two things combined usually put you in a zone where you can find this new make-believe world that you're going to be in.
Now, is it so that, and am I wrong in generalizing that, the two major schools are Stanislavski and Meisner? Is that?
Well, Meisner comes from that. They're connected. I wouldn't even separate them.
And Meisner was more
Meisner if there was no Stanislavski.
Right. Stanislavski was more about sense memory and your experiences.
Using your own experiences and your own experiences of life. Well, let's put it this way. At the best writing schools, there's the phrase that no writer can write anything they do not know on some level, what the underpinnings are. It's the same thing for acting. And that can get much deeper, but that's a very simple statement, but it's not, simple doesn't mean easy. And by the way, we're the one profession where when we're doing our work at its optimum, you don't see any work.
Right.
It should be. And nobody says, I'm going to go, I want to play the violin for the New York Philharmonic. Here, coach me on this song, and I'm going to go up there and audition. It wouldn't work. It doesn't work that way. No one says, I'm going to go up on the high wire and do these tricks up there. Coach me. Here's a check. Give me the shortcuts. It doesn't work. There's a respect for it. You don't pitch in the major leagues by hiring a coach and then running out to a baseball team and auditioning. There's a respect. Uda's title of her first book, Brilliant, was Respect for Acting. And again, no one would think that they could pick up a violin and be a virtuoso through a few classes or a few coachings. And there's also a difference between entertainment and a personality and acting. And both of them are totally valid, but a lot of times people conflate those two things.
Well, also, I think the first thing that I found out was understanding that acting is not acting. And Richard Hatch told me this. Richard Hatch told me that when he was back in the 70s, when he was in LA going to acting school in Santa Monica, that whatever school he went to, said there was a sign over the entrance and it said "No acting allowed."
Exactly. Well, I have to do this power seminar all over the world, and one of the things that we go to acting schools, we have acting teachers, acting books, acting classes, and the first thing they tell you when you show up is don't act. So, isn't that interesting? But again. There is a, Marilyn was reminding me that, for all of you out there, Uda does have she also rewrote the book, Respect for Acting, and it's titled A Challenge for the Actor. And I was with Uda when she wrote that on a yellow pad out in Montauk. There's not a living person that knows it better than me, I'll put it that way. But they made a documentary on her teaching. And it's great to watch that because her book can be, especially to a modern reader, a lot of young folk and not so young folk don't have the patience to. It's dense to read through it, but it's brilliant. But to watch the video, Uda Hagen's acting class, it's a different experience because you get to see and watch her. So it's not just reading it. It's not just the ideas intellectually. You're watching it put into practice. And that includes scene work. It also includes she has 10 exercises in her book, of which I'll just I'd actually do one of them, and Marilyn actually does the one right after me in the actual documentary. But to see it put into practice, I think can help clarify a lot of things. I used to teach you hold a workshop and it was never to make money. It was always for free. That it was for people who had read the book and had been working on Buddha's approach, that we would just have this whole session to clarify it. And I would go through different things of the book and then help them raise questions. But I always wanted to make sure someone had been studying with it, so they had a point of reference rather than someone who was just thinking about it. So, and that was very enlightening, and I haven't done it in a while, and I actually miss doing it. I'll look forward to doing it again. But,
you have to. Yeah, one day we'll get you to do one. One day when this all clears up, we're going to get you to do something at our studio.
Oh, absolutely. Well, you know, I've been coming to Atlanta for 25 years. I mean, I'm not one of the carpetbaggers running down there now. That all the industry. No, I've been coming there for decades, and
excited. That's great.
And when I love Atlanta and the actors there, and I cherish my time there. And I up until the summer, where I did the out of town tryout of, I was in a show called A Bronx Tale. We did it out of town, and then we had the summer off, and then we moved to Broadway. During that summer, I spent like the past 7 summers half in Australia and half in Atlanta, and that was the last time I was in Atlanta. I actually, believe it or not, I coached some people there, Skype, and I also, believe it or not, there's a few casting directors there that I coach, helping them direct actors in their sessions, and they give them better tools so that they can be more effective in their job as a casting director. So that's a lot of fun to do.
It's so funny. I don't know if do you remember my friend just, how crazy is this, just texted me, Paloma Alvarez. She was in class with me, in your class with me. And she loved you too, by the way. So she doesn't know what that means. She always gives me crap about being a geek. She's so funny. She's like the person from Howard's class that I still stay in touch with. So I have to, the one thing, as a volleyball coach, one of the coaches we studied was John Wooden, legendary UCLA basketball coach. He divided everything into process and content, right? Process being how you teach, how you coach. And he used the words teaching and coaching interchangeably. They meant the same thing to him. But there was the process, and then there was the content. He was like, look, once you can coach, once you can teach, once you have the process, the content's irrelevant. You can coach any sport because you understand, you just have to learn the new skill sets, right? But it's the teaching. And it's very true. And so it's funny because when I think of Howard, I remember the content he gave me. Like, I remember him saying, he has some great quotes. For me, he said, the thing he said to me that was the driving force through the rest of my acting career was, he said, Alec, you've lived in your left brain your entire life, and I need you to live in your right brain. And that's when I was like, yeah, I'm fucked.
No, not necessarily. Because there's times that's very useful to you.
It was incredibly useful. Incredible.
You bring up a good point, because when I work with a lot of other people besides actors, I'll work with singers, dancers, athletes, high-level athletes. I love that because they have a sense of themselves in a certain discipline. My job is to build the bridges from that discipline to this discipline. And I've coached even on set, like dancers and musicians, athletes, and my language with each one of them is different. My job is like to be a UN interpreter. I've got to understand where you're coming from. Being right does not make anyone a good teacher. What makes you a good teacher is that the student then owns the information. It's not about the student hanging out in my knowledge. It's about the student or the client then having the knowledge themselves. That's what makes it. Uda had an extremely bright torch that burned. She did not want people hanging out in her shadow. She gave me fire. And now I try to pass fire on. And my life mission pretty much is Uda didn't do, she was blacklisted. Those of you who know what that was in the McCarthy era. And her television and film career were greatly affected by that. So she did not have, her main thrust was theater. And no one did it like her. But one of my life missions is to build bridges from her principles, infusing them into camera work, and be it television or film. So that's kind of my self-given mission that I've been pursuing and continue to pursue.
And you do it magnificently. I'm so glad we've reconnected because your passion is always infectious. I'll tell you the other thing. One of the other quotes that I remember. Two things. One that applies to you. Howard once said, he said, "We didn't become actors because we got too much attention when we were kids." So I'm thinking that's right. That's probably true. He also said one of the most important life lessons he said, which I'm sure you know, is he said, "We judge others by their actions, and we judge ourselves by our intentions."
Yeah, sure.
And that's always been, that's kind of like the touchstone that I always, when I'm always judging, how much of my own bullshit I'm eating. I need to remember that and go, yeah, got to remember what Howard said. I'm just, my actions are not in line with my intentions, and so I can't. So anyway,
someone's asking me if I may, if Marilyn or I are Axanar fans. I am. I mean, I have not followed it microscopically, but again, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so I appreciate it a lot, and I always just loved what it's about, the underpinnings of it, and just the world of it, and I love it because I remember I didn't see it because I don't remember how old I was when it first came out, but if you ever watched the pilot, the version of Star Trek, it's something contrasting what happens today in television. They had the essence, and the same thing with like Friends. You watch, or even like X-Files. If you watch the first episode of those shows, you see the seed of the characters there. You saw why they were cast. They had all the actors had the core of what those characters were, but it wasn't refined. Like when you look at Spock, all of them, look at all of the initial, even James Kirk, the whole crew, their characters, the essence of them were there, but it took like a season for not just the actors, the writers, the wardrobe, the makeup, the directors, the music, all of the elements of it they found the show that, like I said, X-Files, Megan Mullally, with that voice.
She's awesome. I love her.
All those shows. If you then Star Trek especially, you watch the pilot episode, then you watch it 2-3 years in, and you're like, wow. But it was there. Again, the essence was there at the beginning, but it was nowadays. If it's not at that point, which back in the day would have been 2 years in, at the get-go, you're out. So there's they don't nurture and develop those things. You very rarely, you never see it. If they don't hit numbers immediately, and by the way, they're small. The pie, which we know, has been cut into much smaller wedges. And if you don't hit the numbers of your wedge immediately, you're out. But thank God, like with Star Trek and what it was about, they gave it. Back then they allowed that with TV. They nurtured it, and they found all that company of people, creatives, found what it was. And what's cool is, believe it or not, I've watched you find even Axanar. Granted, you have something to base it on that was there, but finding it, even with I watched again tonight the preview. Would you call it the
Axanar?
Yes, and just watching you finding the tone and your own, because it's not the exact. I mean, of course, it's extremely similar to Star Trek. It's what it's based on, for God's sake, and that's what you're emulating. Right. And it is the world. Yet your own take on it and your own perspective of it has a slight unique perspective. So, but in which you've been working so diligently all these years to bring to life. So,
and for my role in it, in the acting, I have all of you to thank. I worked with Richard Hatch for 2 years, and he was amazing. And the wonderful thing was, I was living in LA, in Toluca Lake, and right down the road was Howard and David Corey and Marilyn and you, and Richard Hatch was around the corner. It's the riches, the wealth of riches is just ridiculous. I was so fortunate. But when we did Prelude, before we did Prelude, the director for that, Christian, he had me, when we were doing rehearsals, we watched a lot of Band of Brothers, and we watched all those interviews with Major Dick Winter and all Easy Company, and we watched them, and we really paid attention to how they were talking about what they had been through. That was for us. That was what it was about.
Well, I watched some of your. Of course, I'm going to look at your performance and have thoughts about it. But what I appreciated was, and it's something that a lot of times people have this misnomer that if you look at someone, you're listening, and that's not true. Or if you're talking, like you look at someone all the time. We almost never do. And to watch you source, and I'll call it, she would call it inner object or source, the source of what you were talking about, you would contact it in order to then express it. But it wasn't already there and you weren't saying it at the camera, which wouldn't work. And whether it was conscious on your part or not, you have found the place where you are contacting those other things. Like in those interviews with Bands of Brother, they have experiences and sources of things that they're contacting that enrich the thing. That's all the stuff under the surface. So even when you were making your references to all of the different details of people, places, and events, they weren't just words on a page. It's almost like a recipe of a meal. The actual substance of the meal is not on that piece of paper and in those words. They just point to the substance of the meal. But it was nice to watch you and your work. And I can say this because I remember when you first came in my studio. And you did something. You didn't have it, but you needed to trust it. Trust it was there. You just needed to know how to trust it and nurture it. But to find those things so that they are now there for you to then take it to another level.
Well, so the greatest compliment I got from anyone about my acting, and Richard was so supportive, and it was so wonderful. But a fan said to me once, he said, and I hadn't expressed this. He didn't know what I had rehearsed and how we had done it. It was right after we released it. And he said, Alec, he said, when I was watching you, it was like I was watching Dick Winter in Band of Brothers. I was like, thank you.
That's great.
And that's not in the words. That's in the eyes. That's
what's not said. It's the stuff you bring to it. So that's the challenge. But yeah, absolutely. Well, and another thing too, I'll just bring this up because it's I'm actually writing a book. It's been years in the making, and it's based on this seminar that I do and all my teaching and coaching that I do. But one of the things that's very active right now, which is what I'm doing now, is camera work, and it's auditioning. Most people separate auditioning from acting, from the work. That's the biggest mistake in the world, and it's almost like. It would be like a diver separating the dive. Like every time a diver leaves the board, they execute the dive, whether they're in an Olympic pool or not. And most actors, one of the things I'm teaching now online because of the pandemic, I actually had a class in Atlanta that I taught at a magnificent school called the Lovett School that dear friends of mine run the arts department there. And they bring me in to help them with the department, and they created an honors program for the students. At any rate, I was coming down there periodically, and we were doing online classes as a group. And then, of course, the whole thing migrated to totally online. But it was very tandem to my coaching. I taught a class this afternoon with actors in LA and in New York together. And I'm teaching people how to self-tape because you have to be in your element. It's like when you're on a set, you have to be in your element. When you're in an audition room, you must be in your element. When you are self-taping, you must be in your element. And most actors don't feel in their element. And that's why you have to train yourself to the point where you are in your element doing your work. Mark Spitz doesn't walk in, Mark Spitz, I just dated myself. Michael Phelps does not walk into a pool area and go, oh shit, water. No, it's part of what you do. So when there's a camera, that should not freak an actor out. And neither should it in a studio, neither should it in front of a camera. But I'm talking all over the place here. But what I'm trying to get at is that something that my father said to me when I was moving to New York, and it's the truth. He said, actors act. You want to be a good actor? Act. And act around people who do it better than you. That's what makes you a good actor. And that's why you come to, no audition is created because of an actor's need. Auditions are created because someone else has a need, and we are there to fulfill their needs. And the person who has to cast you in the role is you. You cast yourself in the role of that captain. Is it Captain Garth? You cast yourself in that role. You owned it. So there's a lesson in that you probably didn't even realize was going on. You knew it. You cast yourself in it. I mean, you actually literally did, but psychologically.
Yes,
no, you're to it, but that's what you must do with every role. Everybody says, "I hope they cast me." No, that's misplaced hope. You have to cast yourself and do that. That doesn't mean just rub a crystal and think. You have to do the work.
Right.
You have to know how to do that's why preparation is so important. But
and listen, I took your audition class in LA, and it was and I had no interest in auditioning. That right? I'm not particularly interested in acting and other things. I love it.
I get it.
I love it, and I would, but it's not where my destiny lies. And but taking your class you always said, you go into an audition because it's an opportunity to work. If you focus on getting the job, you're totally screwed.
The name of my book, the working title of my book is Never Audition. Parentheses, prepare to work, not audition. And if you have a work ethic, you just do your work ethic for you. I know, and it took me a while as an actor here in New York, self-taping a lot. I coach a lot of people as well, but doing it for myself, I crossed the line where I love doing it. And a lot of times the actors will say, "Oh, I have to learn these words. I have to do a self-tape." No, change the word "I have to" I get to, and to enjoy it. And you do it for your own enjoyment of the work. And when you're working at that level, your work changes.
I'm sure it does. Well, and my character, Garth of Izar, is based on a character from an episode of the original Star Trek in the third series.
Which one?
It's called Whom Gods Destroy, and the character was played by Steve Einat, who was in the 60s, was one of the hottest actors in the 60s. What
was the action of that episode? Try to remind me the storyline, because I stink.
It's so basically Kirk and Spock being down to this insane asylum, this penal colony, and it's the last criminally insane. And his hero, Garth of Izar, has gone insane and is interred at this colony. He winds up taking over the colony and everything.
I know what it is. Yep.
Yeah. So that actor, who was in everything in the 60s, he was so hot. And he wound up dying at the Cannes Film Festival at the age of 36. He was producing a film. Yeah. So the great story is, a year and a half ago, I saw a picture of a book that purported to be the biography of Steve Einat. And I'm like, no one's going to write a biography of Steve Einat. No one knows who he is anymore. Yeah. And anyway, I checked on Amazon. It was a real book. And it had just come out. And the author, so I immediately find the author on Facebook, Linda Alexander. And we start talking. And she didn't know about our project. And I didn't know about her book. And
wow.
2 hours away, we invited her up. We were doing this convention called Axanar. We were doing this convention, and I said, well, come up and talk about Steve. I mean, this would be great.
Wow.
He says, okay, I will. Would you mind if I bring Steve's widow with me? And I was like, mind? Are you kidding? Don't if you don't bring her.
Wow.
So Sally Marshall Einat, who is Steve's widow, and and Linda have all become friends. And
wow.
When we taped in December, I was taping a scene, and Sally was there, and it was the most wonderful.
Wow!
Because she has totally embraced what we're doing.
I was going to say, does she come on board like a
loves it? It's amazing. It's just, yeah, it's really sweet, and she writes me letters, and we've become pen pals. And she was supposed to come down to our March shoot, but it was just the beginning of the COVID thing. And she's like, I don't really feel comfortable, because she's 70 something.
Sure, of course.
So anyway, I thought I would share that, because that has been an amazing experience for me. And I've learned so much about this actor, who basically, if he had lived, he would be Clint Eastwood. He was becoming a director and a producer and all that. And he was one of the hottest. I mean, he was turning down jobs left and right. If you go, he's in The Outer Limits, he's in Twilight Zone, he's in Gunsmoke, and blah blah blah. He's in all these shows. Yeah, it's check out his IMDb. It's crazy.
If I ask you, when did you get the idea to create this world? Was there a time that could you? Is that such a question? Was there a moment where you said, I have an idea?
So for whatever crazy reason, I
I
really
hope this isn't boring to your audience if they've heard this a million times.
they probably heard it 20 times. No, that's all right. I'm a real fan. I always connected with the character because the actor Steve Inez is so good that there's basically 2 times in the episode when you see him in moments of clarity, and at those times I'm just like mesmerized by him, and I'm like, who is? I mean, first of all, he's James Kirk's hero. Well, don't you want to know who James Kirk's hero is, right? So literally back in the 80s when I was in law school, I wrote a story. I started, I never finished it, but I wrote a story about this character. And then 10 years ago, I actually got the costume Steve Inez wore in the original episode of Star Trek, because I collect Star Trek props and costumes. How
did you come across that, at a convention or?
A collector friend of mine had it, and he said, "Hey, I have this costume. You interested?" And I'm like, "Yeah, how much is it?" And wrote him a check, and it's been in my collection since. And it fits perfectly.
Wow.
Yeah, I've worn it on screen.
Wow.
So anyway, 10 years ago, I was talking with a guy who was doing fan films up in New York, and he was like, we need to put that character in our film. Why don't you come and play him in that?
There we go.
Wow. That's what so enough of me. Let's talk about you again. I've got to tell the other story about that you are so relevant to, is you would always say how in auditioning, you're not looking for that job. Don't focus on getting the job.
Oh, go ahead.
You always said, don't focus on working, because if your work is great, the casting director will remember you.
Yeah, you don't go in with your needs. Your needs are very real, totally inappropriate. Can you imagine calling the fire department and the fireman shows up and says, "Wow, thank you for calling. It's tax time and I need this money." You'd be like, "What the hell?" That might be true, but it's inappropriate. Or if you called a paramedic and grandma's on the ground and the paramedic says, "Oh, dude, thanks for calling. My rent is due." You'd be like, "What?" While that might be true, it's inappropriate. I said this before. No audition is created for an actor's need. You are there because someone else has a need, and they're hoping you will fulfill that need. So you must go in there with the confidence of, "I got this down." And you go in with their needs. You're there to take care of them. You're actually there to take care of the character's needs. So I'm there, I'm in there. If I'm going in there as Captain Kirk, I'm there to, figure out what to do with the tribbles. That's, not get a job. My job is to see when it's about you. This is about, and it's like it's a good life lesson. You don't make it about you. You make it about someone else. It's like a tennis player. You don't focus on yourself. Everything you do is dependent on what someone else does. And when you learn to listen that way, when you learn to work that way, it's a great life thing. That's why I'm really good. I never took a class on how to pitch in my life, a show. I also teach at one of the best film schools on the planet, so I pick it up. I mean, it's innate. But I believe I'm really good at it, and I say that humbly, but I'm really good at it, like extraordinarily good at it. It's because of that technique as an actor. I don't focus on me or my project. I know my project. What I don't know is you and what your response is going to be. So my entire focus is on how you respond, what your questions are, what you respond to, what you don't respond to. My whole experience is gauged on you, not on me. There's that old metaphor of when people get nervous doing public speaking, what's one of the first things they tell someone to do to help them with that?
Pretend everyone's naked.
Picture everybody. That's why that works. Because you get nervous because you're thinking about me. Well, how do I look? I'm going to fail. Me. But when you're picturing other people in their underpants, you're not focused on you. You're focused on them. That's where the nerves go away, and it becomes about something else. When you go into an audition hoping to get the job, pretty much count on you won't.
Right.
It's not your focus.
Right.
Your focus needs to be on the work, which is the character's need in the room.
And I've told you this before, but one of my good friends is an actor, David Dean Buttrell.
Mm-hmm.
David, I met him because he put on the Sci-Fest, which was the Los Angeles Science Fiction One-Act Play Festival. He did it for 3 years, and after the first year, he contacted me about fundraising, and we met and we were talking, and he said, "Well, I'm an actor," and I said, "Oh, so have you been in anything I've seen?" And he said, I was in Boston Legal. And I'm like, oh my God, I love Boston Legal. I go, who are you? He goes, I was Lincoln Meyer. Now, if you know Boston Legal, that was one of the best. That was the best guest character in all of Boston Legal. And I was like, oh my God, that's, oh my God, that's right. That was you, right?
Yeah.
Funny thing was him telling the story of how he got the role. He literally had an audition and didn't get the role. And something like 15, 18 years later, the casting director hunts him down and finds him. Says, are you still acting? And he goes, yeah, why? She goes, I have the perfect role for you. And I said, when he told me that, I said, I got to tell Ted this story because this is all the time.
Absolutely. There's a million reasons why you don't get cast, but never let it be the quality of your work. There's so many things that are, it's physical. There's so many different, my first job in New York when I moved here, I worked at ABC Primetime Casting for off and on for 7 years. So anything, just the pilots of anything that they did on primetime, movies, specials, TV, all the pilots, I was in the room. And this is back, there was no internet. They had to be pre-screened and they had to be filmed. We FedEx the tapes to LA and go back and forth. And the producers would come in and they'd hold the final sessions often. And I was paid to learn. You can't learn that in a classroom. And there's so many reasons why. When it gets down to it, there's usually a number of people that could play the part and that are brilliant. They didn't get it. It wasn't because their work wasn't stellar. There are other factions that come in. But here, I use lots of metaphors. It's like this. When you go into, have you ever gone back to have you ever had food poisoning?
Oh, yeah.
Now, how many times do you run back to that restaurant after you've had food poisoning?
You don't.
And casting is like that. You do not serve bad food because they will not come back to you. It's very difficult to convince somebody to come back once you've given them, serve that. Do not serve that. That's why you take everything, put your name on everything, your quality of work. Never just say, oh, this is just a webisode. This is just an online thing. This is just a bullshit. No, you put your stamp on it because you never know who's going to see it. And you're also constantly working at your optimum. So there's so many reasons why you don't get cast, but never let it. So what happens in an audition, you either end up, they may love what you do. You want to end up a healthy ingredient in their kitchen. When you go to a restaurant, they don't bring out everything that's edible in the kitchen. Only so much can fit on that plate. But what you want to do is end up an ingredient in the kitchen and not in the dumpster. You don't want your picture and resume to end up in the dumpster because that's where it'll go if you deliver bad goods. But if you deliver good goods, they're going to say, you know what? We can't use him in this because we need somebody that's Asian. But you know what? Hang on to his stuff. And they leave it. And plus, a lot of times with actors starting out, you don't get cast your first time. It's relationship building. But when you come in, if they call you back, you did something right. That means they're not going to call you back if you poisoned them, to continue with the metaphor, the food poisoning. So that's why just constantly doing quality work will beget work.
Now, you told a great story, and I want you to tell it again. And it was about you were auditioning for a role on Broadway, for a singing role. And you did what you always say don't do, which is you asked them the chance to do it again.
It was actually it was a Stephen Sondheim show called Assassins. It was my first big gig in New York. I went in and I didn't know what was going on. It was what was called Manhattan Theater Club. That's where they were holding the auditions. And every singing head on Broadway was going in and out of that room. And I'm really an actor that sings. I mean, I'm talking major voices going, and I'd get a little intimidated. No, never intimidate the show. I go, no, just do what you do. Do what you do. Just trust in what I did, and I knew I was good with acting, and I knew I could move well. I knew I had more than just one skill. So at any rate, I went in, and it was like this is hours and hours calling back, and they kept narrowing it down, smaller group, smaller group. I had no idea what was all going on. This was a Friday. I'll never forget it. And there was a small group of us left towards the end, and they said, they said, okay, we're going to take you into another room. Can you stay a little bit? I said, sure. And I walk into the room, and it's the entire production team. I had no idea. Stephen Sondheim. I mean, everybody. It was a wall full of people, and it was Broadway gold. And I did a song from Evita called "The Money Kept Rolling In." Back in the day, I called it "High, Loud, and Angry." They would want to say, I said, you want high, loud, and angry? Because that's what the auditions they would want. And so I did my high, loud, angry song. I mean, it was Assassins after all. And I did it. And then I read for the part and nailed it. And they said that was, then they asked me, oh no, I read first. Then they had me sing. And I sang, and there's that Mandy Patinkin, that very high, and then I pop up another octave in my falsetto, and I did it, right? And I was leaving the room, and Paul Gemignani, who was the conductor and the musical director, he said, Ted, he said, hold on a second. He said, could you come back? He said, could you sing that again and do it a third up? And I was like, or was it third, was it a half step or third? He asked me to raise the key. I'm already like squeezing my boys and singing at the top of my, like the dogs were barking in Manhattan. I think it's a little high, crazy. It's very difficult stuff to do, let alone in an audition. But I went, okay, sure. And I knew the piano player, his name was Paul Ford. He was playing. I said, Paul, because it's very difficult to play on the piano, which is why most people wouldn't walk in with it. But even if the piano player doesn't know it, I'll drag him along with me because I'm so solid in it. So that's why I picked it. So I said, Paul, I said, are you all right with that? Because it's very difficult to transpose on site like that with that kind of music. He went, sure, let's give it a go. So I did it. And I got, because, when you sing a song over and over, you kind of know where it lives. Well, it went to a different place. And I did it. And the casting director went, that was great. And I said, this was all within 2 seconds. I said, no, it wasn't. I can do it better. I said, let's do it again. Take it from there. Here we go, go. And I knew as I was doing it, I'm either going to get this job or I'm going to lose it. But I knew in my subconscious, and this is like lightning thoughts. There was no sitting and thinking. I just went on instinct because I knew if I left that room and I did not get cast, I would hate myself because I didn't do it as well as I knew I could have. So I took the risk. I could have choked. It came out in the cat. I remember when he said that was great, and they looked and I went, no, it's not. They literally went like this in their seat. I said, no, I can do it better. I said, take it back. Let's do it better. I said, here we go. And boom, he did it, and thank God I did it. And they said, you know what? You're right. It was better. And I went, thank you, and I left. Now another lesson comes from that. That was a Friday. Well, it was a Friday afternoon, and I went home. And I'm not name dropping, but a very dear friend of mine and colleague, his name is Stephen Flaherty. He wrote Ragtime, Once on This Island, a lot of wonderful shows. And I was like, oh, I said, I can't wait for this to be over. He said, what are you talking about? I said, oh, and I told him what happened during the day. He goes, Ted, it is over. Get on with the next thing, which is, and he was right. But it's very difficult when it means that much to you and it's that large of a project with that ilk of people. And I just remember I hated that weekend because I knew I was never going to hear till Monday. Thank God I got the call that they cast me. But again, there's a couple big lessons in that. But again, I knew it's happened to me a couple times. I've been in the room and they've said something and I go, no, I can do that better. And they'll go like this, and it's risky. It's a risk. I don't recommend everybody does this all the time, and I certainly don't do this all the time. But just something in my instinct just said, do it, and I honored it. And thank God I met my own challenge. So, but I'd rather take that risk.
Yeah, and leave it.
And it's also not something that I was not prepared. I mean, I wasn't prepared to sing it higher, but I work very hard at what I do. And I give the one thing, that's another thing that I try to teach directors and producers to do with their actors. If you have a good actor, they put time and care into this. Honor them to see what work they brought in. Even though you're late and in a hurry, granted you can't stay there all day, but to have some patience with the person and see what it is they're bringing to you. It's metaphors again. It's like auditions are like a potluck meal. You've been asked to contribute a meal. Most actors show up with empty Tupperware, looking what they're going to take away, as opposed to what they're bringing. And then when you bring something that you prepared with love and care, you can then be free to pay attention to what everybody else is doing. And that's the zone to be in. It's on the other people, not you. So, I mean, I could go on forever, but I will share this. I don't know. My guess is you don't have a lot of actors out there, but I do very often. I'll do workshops or seminars, and I'll do like a pay what you can. It's not to make money. Uda was one of the best living acting teachers. She charged $5 a class. She went through Ajita for 3 years before she raised it to $7. It was never about making cash on that way. She made her money from her other productions. And when I teach, I'm probably the most actor friendly in those terms. I'd rather have a room full of 12 people who are passionate and care than to have 40 people paying me a fortune. I'm just not interested in that. But I do seminars and I do some classes that I'm doing now. And they're all, especially because we're all in this together. It's like, if you have money, throw something at me to help me out. And if you don't, no worries. Because, our paths will cross again.
That's a rare thing.
if anybody's interested in just checking that out, they should, let you know, and you can give them my email.
We'll put it in the show notes. We'll put all your information. So
yeah, sure.
We'll get a hold of you. Tell us about your work with James Gandolfini.
Oh, yeah. Well, you had asked me who I coached. So I coached James on his last, knew him very well, on his last 5 movies for years. James was an amazing man. And I would happen to have been, I had just seen him on a Friday afternoon. I had lunch with him in LA, and I got on a plane and flew to Australia, and he was dead. They pulled me out of the classroom and said, "Did you see the social media?" I'm like, "No, why?" They said, they pulled me in another room. James Gandolfini. I said, "What?" And it was surreal. Then I flew back for the funeral. It was awful, but he was amazing to work with. And he would fly, like he did a wonderful movie called, it was with Brad Pitt, called Killing Me Softly. And he had 2 huge monologues that you don't often get in movie scripts. And so he flew me in from LA. I flew into New York, and we coached here before he flew to New Orleans to shoot it. And we worked 2 days straight, 7.5 hours a day. We took no break. We took a 15-minute, 8 hours. We took a 10 to 15-minute break. We had room service send us some fish up. We ate, put it down, and kept working. Now, this is a man at that level. We was extremely focused work. We worked for about 5 days. But those 2 days were intense on that movie. And James didn't hire me to teach him how to act. He hired me to open his mind to different possibilities as to how to approach it, and also to keep him honest. And I mean, I gave him lots of notes, but we worked really well together, and we would do that. So let's see what happens if we try it this way, or if we would do it, and then we'd say, let's try it this way. Okay, now let's see what happens. And we would do it, and we'd analyze it and say, then I would say, what if we do it this way? So this time when you get to this place, what about? And I would just feed his creativity and his imagination by giving him ideas from other angles that he didn't.
No. So
and he would even say, he was always very often hired to be, soprano, to be the thug, to be the, so how can he find a new way or something new about it, or a different way to approach cooking the same meal over and over? How can I do this one? And so that's one of the things that I would help him with. And there was,
when you say approach it this way or this way, so I know you're always trying to be spontaneous and you don't want to pre-plan stuff. So give me an example of the feedback that you might be giving him to show a different possibility.
Well, his character had a thing with women and with hookers and with his wife. And I would say, okay, like in this scene, so what would happen if when we did it this way, like this woman, like you thought like X, Y, or Z about her, and then we do the scene and see where that, we never planned the how. We would just kind of put that in and see what would happen. We would discover what it would do.
Yeah.
And then, so we know that if we put that in there, that takes us into that neighborhood. Okay, now what would happen if, and then say then I'd switch that out with another choice. And then we said, okay, and then we just go and see what. And so by the time he got to New Orleans, he had at least 5 ways that we'd already done it. And I said, Brad Pitt's going to have an idea, and so is that director. I said, so chances are your performance isn't going to be any of the things we just did. It's going to be something else. But it was informed. It was informed by trying out. When I coach actors, I don't just say do this. I'll try it this way. I said, then also be prepared. It could go this way, or it could go a way we're not even talking about. But there's not one way to get it right, and you're not focused on the result. You're focused on you're not. It's hard to get into this in a quick web episode.
No, it's all good.
But that or like where to giving him different things to focus on or to put in there. Like I got on the plane to fly back, or the first flight that next morning after our last session. And I had a thought on the way to the airport in the car, and I actually, I knew he was still up. We had been up very, very late. And I texted him and I said, I have a question for you. He said, what's that? We texted. I said, do you wear that wedding ring when you're with those hookers? Because he was a married man. And it was just something that no one would even know, but it was just something that from thinking like putting yourself in the skin of the character, but just little things like that I would try to like ask. I asked a lot of questions. And I'll share this with you. What I learned the most, and when I teach, I'll say, the answers are valuable. More valuable are understanding the value of the questions. Why are those questions great? With Uda, I look, why did she ask that? And you start to learn what the great questions are. And that's when you're really learning. The answers will be there. It's learning how to ask the most valuable questions. That is the challenge at times. And then again, I'm going all over the place here. Another way to look at learning, because a lot of times actors come to you and they want to know, what do I need to do? I need to get better. What do I need to do? What do I need to do? What do I need to do to make it work? What do I need to do to make it better? There's another whole approach which, when you start to learn at a certain level, the lessons are not in what to do. They're learning what you don't have to do, if that makes any sense. You start learning what you don't have to do, which then opens you up to something else. But James was magnificent. There was a show here in New York called Royal Pains that was on for like 9 seasons with Mark. I coached Mark for that lead. He's the face of the show, and he went through hell to get that role. He was a major actor back then. He was on People magazine, 50 top actors of the year. He had been, he'd had a substantive career. Still got nervous. He was flop sweat. Nerves. You never get rid of nerves. Nerves are energy. You learn where to direct that energy. If anybody tells you they're going to make you not be nervous, run from them. Nerves means you care, and it's an energy. But if you have a craft, you know where to direct that energy. So Mark would come in flop sweating, and they kept calling him back. And it was the USA Network was young then. This was like their second big show, and they had millions on it. And they're picking the face of the show. It's a big deal. He would go into these final callbacks with these pit of executives, and I could say, he would come in and say, they're making me go back in again. I go, all right, what's happening in the room? He was freaking out. But I helped focus him on that stuff. And that's actually what started this whole seminar and me putting my book together. I mean, I'd been doing it for years, but so Mark was magnificent to work with. Oh my goodness. Valerie Pettifor, who I work with all the time, she's on, oh my God, 2 recurring already. And she just booked, we Skype coach, and she actually taped herself through the devices here. She's a lead in a new NBC pilot that's going to be made when the pandemic lifts. A young lady named Alexa Swinton. There was a show called Emergence that was on ABC this past year. You probably would dig it. It's kind of sci-fi. And the young lady, the whole show was built on her. I coached her for all her auditions and her screen tests and everything. And that's a young girl. So, I mean, I've been very fortunate. I mean, there's a lot of other people. I mean, I got rid of the light to look and go, who the hell have I worked with? I forget. But I mean, and I trail directed on a lot of TV shows. Drew Carey show, Wanda Sykes show, a lot of stuff.
What do you prefer doing, acting or coaching actors?
Oh no, I prefer either. I like it all. I like it all, but my passion. I remember when Uda would be in a show, you wanted to be, when she was rehearsing, you wanted to be in class because she was on fire, because she was doing it. And I know with myself, when I'm doing it, like, I was on Broadway for the better part of 2 years. I worked on that project for 3. I was on fire when I started teaching again because I'm on the front line doing it, and I'm just so in touch with it, and I'm constantly learning. I mean, if you were to take my audition class today, it would be very different. It would be similar, but it's evolved. It doesn't just stop. And but I love doing both. I love directing. Because it is coaching. Yet other element, you're also responsible for other elements. But I love directing, and I have a couple shows in the hopper that I've created that this is kind of nice to have time to work on that in my book. But acting is, I love it. It's a lot of fun. I don't know that I like one more than the other. They give me thrills in different areas.
I get it. So we're going to wrap it up, but tell us about your last little stint on Broadway.
Oh boy, I was very fortunate enough. And by the way, I got the role. I put myself on tape in Los Angeles for it was A Bronx Tale, and co-directed by Jerry Zaks and Robert De Niro. Chaz wrote the book. Alan Menken wrote the music. It was the top of the line. I was actually on my way to Australia, and I saw on the trade, because it's one of my most beloved movies. I love this beloved movie of mine. And I was on my way to Australia, and I saw that they were going to bring this thing to Broadway, and I went, shit. Because I had been in LA. I hadn't been auditioning for many years. I just had, my mind was in another gear. And I thought, I'm going to go see this, and I'm going to kick myself in the ass. So I made a couple phone calls, and I found out that they had already done a workshop, and they had cast most of the roles, but a few roles were going to be open that they would fill in, and they would be doing that at the end of the summer. So I didn't say anything. I started singing every day. I didn't say anything to anybody. Just in case I got the opportunity, I wanted to have my chops together. I worked out. I stayed in good shape. I sang every day. And sure enough, I got back to LA and I got a call from this casting office and they said, we'd like you to come in. Before you come to New York, why don't we do this step at a time? Because they said they're being very specific with what they want. And they've seen everybody. And they're having trouble casting these roles. So they sent me the material. I stayed up until 5:30 in the morning in I have my own studio. My studio, I got a college buddy of mine to tape me. And I had to put 5 different scenes on tape and 2 or 3 songs. I stayed up all night and did it, fired it off to them. All I wanted was to be in the room with them. Fuck getting the job, excuse my French. I just wanted to be in the room with those guys working on this. That was my goal. Getting the job, of course, would be awesome, but my goal was just, I wanted them to say, come to New York. And sure enough, they got it. And before that business day was out, they said, would you fly to New York? And I was like, yes. I didn't tell anybody about it. I kept it to myself. I told myself, how was talking about it going to make me better? I went, it's not. I put my energy into my work. I went to New York. I did it. They've had me, the director, and a couple casting people in a little room first. They said, we're going to bring you in to meet everybody. And I was so thrilled. And I had to practice everything I preach. And it was about, a lot of times you go into the audition and it feels like it's the long green mile when you're walking in and doing it. And it should not be that. It should be your stairway to paradise. And I just knew, enjoy being in the room. And I was very prepared. I won't get into that, but that's another whole story, how I prepared. But I went in that room. I was so excited. And I saw a couple familiar faces and plus a lot of people I didn't know. There was about 45 people. And it was in the theater. And they had you get up on the stage and do it. I loved it. I loved every minute. I did it, thank God. He said, and there was like 5 different parts they had me prepare. And we started with the one that I thought was my favorite. And I was like, yes, and I did it. He said, that was wonderful. And he gave me an adjustment. I did the adjustment. And they burst out laughing. And they said, and I left the room. And I knew, even if I didn't get it, I was cool because I played my A game. And they saw thousands of people. Anybody who ever did Jersey Boys anywhere, anybody who ate a slice of pizza, they saw. I mean, they saw lots of people. And for whatever the gods, that things just, it all aligned. And I created my own opportunity and it worked. And I got into that. And so I did the show out of town. And then I got to do it on Broadway with an amazing group of people. Working with De Niro, working with Alan Menken. Chaz actually took over the role. I did it with him on Broadway. It was glorious. And on a sad note, Nick Cordero, who is our lead, he's unfortunately he's 41 years old. He's in Cedars-Sinai. Some of you may have seen on the news. He's been hit by this. He had his leg amputated. He's on a vent. He's on dialysis. He's still fighting. So we do like prayer Zooms together. We try to keep his spirit going to hopefully he'll recover. But at any rate, it was a magnificent experience. And but here I am back in New York, and I'm sure I'll be going back to LA without too much time going, and down to Atlanta too. So I'll make sure we hook up. But now, for my own knowledge, remind me now about where you are with the show, and once this pandemic breaks, because Atlanta's starting to come back to production. So where are you in the scheme of things with that, if I'm allowed?
Excuse me, I got to plug in here. Yes. Well, we have 2 days of shooting left, which is we did
so close
in October. We did 3 days. I'm sorry.
You're so close.
Yeah, we did 3 days of shooting in October, and then we did one day of shooting here in March, which was all my stuff. Because I was originally supposed to shoot in October, but we had like 8 actors, and it was like 2 weeks before the shoot, and I said to the director, I said, you know what? Why? I have more lines than anyone. I said, why are we putting me in this shoot? We can shoot me anywhere. I live 5 minutes from the studio. I said, so we pulled me out, which lightened the load on everyone and gave everyone more time to do stuff. So anyway, so we've shot 4 days. We have 2 days left, but those 2 days are like 8 characters.
Okay.
2 Andorians, a Klingon, 2 Vulcans.
Wow.
So visual special effects.
Yeah, sure.
And Mike Spatola, who's our special effects makeup guy, who's worked for Makeup Effects Lab and taught at Hollywood Makeup School. He's in LA. So, and all the actors are in LA that we're using. So I was like, we're going to do 2 days in LA. So right now what we're doing is we're waiting. We just found out what the SAG, we just saw the SAG white paper that came out.
Yes.
Right. And
today. True. They're saying the film can now open up on June 12th. I just saw something right before we started. Did you see that?
I did not.
Yeah, I believe they just announced that June 12th they're going to try to open things up more. So there you go.
Yeah. So the challenge is, one of the things they talk about in this white paper is having a COVID compliance officer, and that person has to be certified or trained or whatever. But they don't tell you how that happens. Like, well, where do they get certified and where do they get trained?
They're probably still putting that together.
Yeah. So we need some more detail.
Yeah.
I talked to my friend Mike Demerit, who was first AD on Star Trek Voyager and Star Trek Enterprise. So he's a member of the union out there of IATSE. He's part of the DGA, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. And so he was like, look, he said, this white paper didn't tell us anything. He said it was all common sense. Like, we know this stuff. We know everyone's got to wear masks. We know everyone's got social distance. We know we need a temperature when you walk in, and we need, disinfecting solution all over the place. And, but we need more detail. And in putting our budget together for LA, I think one of the challenges for us has been getting the team to understand that we're an indie production. And, you don't need a second AC. I'm sorry, you're not going to get that. And certainly now, with everything, we need as few people on set as possible.
Right. You know what? I bet you're going to find people that are going to get it.
I think so. It's really a question of the actors, what the actors are going to be comfortable with.
Yeah.
And so, we found a location, found a great green screen studio that was pre-lit. So the green screen's pre-lit.
Wow.
So, I wrote off, I was like, because I talked to our gaffer who did gaff our last 2 projects, and he was like, oh, my truck's $2,000 and I'm $600 a day, and then you need 4 of my guys. And I'm like, that's okay. That's a lot of money. And then, so I talked to my DP, one of my DPs, and I was like, why don't I just get a green screen studio that's pre-lit? He goes, yeah, you just need to light the actors. I go, right. Do that. And, so you got to build the budget for, we got to shoot for 2 days, and it's got to cost us $25,000, not $50,000.
You'll do it.
Yeah. And so it's and the COVID thing adds a little, but it adds mass and disinfecting solution and a thermometer. Okay. And a lot of common sense. That's what it requires. So we want to shoot. I don't think we're going to shoot before we're in June. So it's going to be August.
Yeah.
So that's it. But if you're in LA, dude, you'd be a good Klingon.
Oh, I want to roll by and watch. I'm going to come check it out. No,
yeah.
Without a doubt. No, I'd love it. Are you kidding me? I'm going to tell you, when I moved to New York, I would have killed to have been on Star Trek. Are you kidding me? I had a couple of people I knew that were on it, and from my school, and I was like, oh my God. Are you kidding? That would have been a dream come true.
I'll put you into, I've got a connection. I got 2 connections now into Star Trek. I don't tell anyone because CBS hates me still, I think. But
sorry.
Yeah, they don't like getting shown up. But I tell you, if you read, you don't have any time, but if you read
competition for them, you're building their brand, for God's sake.
I know, right? I know. It's like I'm not trying to
total honoring what they do. It's not like you're doing like something like foul or something dishonorable.
No, I know it's not like
tricky. I know.
We want to make a joke. It's like we need to do a movie poster that's Axanar with 3 X's in it, and it's like the
right.
Just a joke.
Right? Imagine. I mean, your fan. Can I ask how big is your fan base? Do you have am I allowed to ask that?
Well, we have 87,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel.
Wow.
We have over 4 million views of Prelude to Axanar.
Wow.
We got about, we have 10,000 donors. I've donated over the years. 20,000 people on our mailing list.
You do GoFundMe? What do you do?
I'm sorry?
You don't do GoFundMe. You have your own individual thing?
We have our own website because part of our settlement agreement is a public fundraiser. So we basically have a white label version of Kickstarter that's on our website. Right. So all the donors go. So, it hampers us on we can't go into Kickstarter, but we do fine. So, Yeah, so it's and like I said, we're totally all about Star Trek. So I'll tell you, before you go to trial, one of the last things you have to do before you go to trial in LA is you have to go to forced mediation. Like they're like, you guys haven't been able to settle this. Well, you're going to go in front of a magistrate judge, and he's going to try and get you guys to settle.
Right.
So we go in there that day, and there's CBS and their lawyers, and there's me and my lawyer. And CBS goes in first. You go into the judge's chambers. They go in. 45 minutes later, they come out, and the judge's like, okay. And we walk in. And he sits down with us. He's this older guy, really nice. And he goes, your problem is you're too good. He says, that's the problem. It's not a copyright violation. You were just put out a product that's too good, and they don't want the competition. That's what he said to us. That's the judge who just spent an hour with 45 minutes with these guys telling us that was the whole crux of it. So anyway, it is we're big fans, and it's funny because now I know some of the people on the production, and one of the people who was doing season 2 of Picard contacted me for some other thing because everyone knows I know we've got these sets and this and that, and I'm like, I love what you guys do. I mean, it's amazing. So anyway, I'm definitely, dude, when we have a shoot in LA, I will let you know. You have got to come in. I'm going to write something for you.
Yeah, let me know. I'm there in a heartbeat. You kidding me?
Yeah, absolutely.
No problem with this actor.
Yeah, I know.
No.
Hey, we need to. You know what we need to do, because since we work with the high schools, we work with all 28 high schools in Gwinnett County.
Okay.
The head of the video production curriculum is on our board of directors, and they come in. There's been like 6 student films filmed on our set, on our bridge set.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but he asked me recently about. We had an advisory board meeting. It was like, what are the skills that need to be taught in the next 5 years? And I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know what the skills are that need to be taught, but I'll tell you, I think you're asking the wrong question, which gets back to questions. I said, the question is, how are you going to teach whatever you're going to teach over the next 5 years? Because this isn't the only time you think this can't happen again next year with COVID?
Yeah, absolutely.
I said, so why don't we think about that? So, and I said, what we need to do is we need to do a bunch of sessions where we bring the people online, and everyone's doing it. Let's do it for the school system. Let's get the kids in the curricula and say, okay, show up on Saturday at 9 a.m. and we're going to have Ted Brunetti teach you about acting. But we need to get Marilyn involved too.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing is, it's all we got to do. That'll be fun. We've not team taught online yet, but that's the next thing.
Let's do. I'm going to call Pasha. Let's figure this out. That would be a lot.
Here's the truth is, it's already happening. It's just a matter of plugging it into whatever your network is. Right. You're already doing it.
Exactly. Well, any chance I get to see you and Marilyn work together, it'll be like old times. I'd love to do it. So, well, Ted, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, and I commend your efforts and keep it up. I look forward. You'll get that stuff shot. I look forward to seeing it.
Well, I look forward to you being a part of it, because now I'm holding you to that.
Anything I can do to help, for real.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
All the best. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
There we go. Come out.
Yeah, there you go. If you're a friend of Ted and you joined us tonight, thank you so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Please feel free to subscribe to our channel, and that way you'll know when Ted and Marilyn are going to be teaching their class online here. Mm-hmm. So, all right, take care, Ted. Thanks so much.
Be well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see everyone here tomorrow night at 10 o'clock again. So in the meantime, please be safe out there. Cheers.